right, this is a true story. Apparently, I read a lot of places, and this is a Scientific American, the Great Kentucky Meat Shower Mystery, unwound by projectile vulture vomit. That's how they explain this meat falling from the sky. Now let's look into this. Okay, my outstanding friends, I got a thing yesterday from a whole batch of people about some flesh pit thing. So I looked into it and I did a video on it and I asked for information about it because I couldn't find anything that supported what it was saying, but it was extremely detailed. So I asked for any information, and it appears that it's completely made up. However, what I was hoping was it was based on an actual place, but he just made up all these fake details about how they use this, what they call a flesh pit. Now, if it is really there, I don't care whether they used it or not. If it's there, I understand what it is. If he's describing what this cave system is, I will understand it fully if it's really actually there. Now, somebody told me that they live in that area, and there was a place down there they called the barbecue pit. I don't know if that's true or not, but they said they lived in Texas, and that was possibly what they're talking about. I have no idea, but the rest of it is actually completely, totally fictional, which upsets me because my stuff is 100% real. What I have in front of me here is a selection of body parts of mud fossils. Now, look at this. Kentucky meat shower. Meat fell out of space. This absolutely happened. And this is extremely well documented, and it was in all kind of papers, and there's all the details are totally out in the open about this, and I am going to explain this. And meat does come from space, and can I prove that? Absolutely I can, because this right here came out of space, and that, my friend, blew out because it was blood. And I have another one here that is a terrestrial fingertip. You see that? That is identical. This just ran the blood out. This is where the arteries are, and it ran out, and the tip is where the arteries. You see this? Even the hook. You see the hook on the fingertip? The hook is the same. This side is where the veins are. Same thing here, veins. This side is where the arteries are. You see that? The arteries blew out. The artery exploded coming through space. This is all cooked off the meat from what that fingertip was. And this is a DNA certified human fingertip. And it's basically the same size as this. Now this is a terrestrial as well. This did not come through space. And it is basically 100% perfect. And you know, I had this CAT scanned and DNA tested and all that. And there's no question it's a giant. And it's human, 100% human. It's just as we are. And I almost guarantee you, and I did the blood work on this. I looked at the blood. It's blood. If this was tested, I bet you it's going to say it's human too, because it damn sure looks like a human. And this came out of space. And they said there was battles in the heavens. As above, so below, it appears. And I'm going to show you some other stuff. They're absolutely going to blow your mind. And this is basically the same exact structure right there. You look at that very carefully. That is identical almost to Comet 67P. Only 67P is a smidge larger. Now let's look into the Kentucky meat shower and what does come out of space. What does come through space? Okay, this is a tweet from Sarah Baird. On March 3rd, 1876, a sudden shower of meat started to fall from the sky in Bath County. Several chemists put forth the theory that the meat shower was a result of a flock of vultures simultaneously vomiting. The Great Kentucky Meat Shower was wild, y'all. Now, what is this? What does it say here? This is the stuff that fell, and they have saved it, and they gave it to people all around the country to look at to see what it was. And people actually ate some of it. And one guy said it tasted like bear, another guy said elk or deer or mutton or something. Now, I'm just going to read to you what the original reports were. On March 3rd, between the hours of 11 a.m. and 12 a.m., a sudden shower of meat started to fall from the sky in Olympian Springs area of Bath County. A local farmer's wife, Mrs. Mary Crouch, was the first person to witness the event. She told newspaper reporters there was a light wind coming from the west, but the sky was clear and the sun was shining brightly. She did not see any flock of vultures, and they attributed this meat shower to a flock of vultures. Some of them she turned up to taste it and adjudged it to be venison or mutton. Samples were collected and sent to chemists and universities around the country. Now, a sample has been kept in Monroe Medical and Science Museum at Transylvania University in Lexington, Kentucky. An inquiry was made on 2/5/19 regarding the sample. We were told that it had been sent to London, England for testing at that time. Now, a lot of things have changed since then. I'd like to know what it is because I have stuff getting through space too. And that right there is a fingertip. And I'm going to show you in great detail about this. This is not just some minor little thing. That's actually where the tendon ball attached right there. That makes your fingers be able to move around. There's another one right there. This gives you the ability to flip your finger around, and that's where all the blood was. And that's where the vein side was, and this is the artery side. And I'm going to show you in great detail. Trust me, you'll be bored by the time I'm done. All right, before we get started, I'm going to tell you right now, the Kentucky meat shower, I've ruled out this vulture theory. That's just crazy. Vultures do vomit up in groups because they've all eaten the same stuff and they're going to die from it if they don't vomit it up. They don't just do it because another guy says, I don't feel good today. This is a whole different situation. Plus a clear sky, totally bright and shiny. You know, these are people that live in the woods. They understand birds. They know what buzzards look like. Buzzards make a pretty good sized pattern in the sky on a bright, shiny day. So let's forget all of that. And because I'm going to show you right now, there's no question whatsoever. There is a ton of meat in space. And just go and look it up. Space smells like steak. The astronauts say it smells like burning metal, like a welder, or it smells like steak. And that is exactly what blood is a ton of metals, all the transition metals right in here are loaded in your blood, and that is what burns off in space. And it smells like burning metal, and it smells like steak because this is what's out there is body parts that was a fingertip. I'm going to show you this in so much detail, you're going to have a hard time denying it when I'm done. Because I have a multitude of them. Like this is another fingertip. And if you can see that black pattern there, I don't know if you can or not, but that's a distal phalanges. And this is the vein side, does not blow out. That's the artery side, does blow out. And that's exactly what happened here. The vein side did not blow out. That's the hook. That's that same hook that's right there. And I have another one here. All right, so now there's the artery side that blew out. This one came through space though, and this one blew out because it was still wet blood in here. Exploded as it heated and burned off all of the fleshy parts. This one this was on my property and it just eroded. This was part of this big hand that I have. And this is a fingertip, another fingertip from it that did not erode. This we had CAT scanned, DNA tested, 100% human. 100% mother's side human mitochondrial DNA. Now, this one is a terrestrial fingertip that just eroded completely like this one. Look at this. There is no difference whatsoever. You see that little hook right there? You see that little hook right there? All right, this side is the vein side. That's the vein, that's the vein. They don't blow out because they have clamps. They say, no, you cannot go this way. Same thing here. That's the vein right there, and that's the vein right there. That's the hook, that's the hook. This is the tip, that's the tip. See? This side just leaked its blood out, and that's the blood right there. If you can't see that, I don't know what to say. That's the blood, and that's the blood on the tip. And that's what happens here in fingertips. They have one side which is the artery. Let's take this one here. You got two, this is the artery. Boom, boom, and boom. Boom, boom, and boom. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. All right? Same with this one. Boom, boom, boom. That's a fingertip. And that is the black distal phalanges pattern of the bone black, they call it. I don't know if you can see it. These are the blood supplies, the vein and the artery. The vein does not blow out. There's the vein side. So that's like right here. The same as this is right there. Same thing. Exactly the same. All right, so this side does not blow out because that's the vein. It sends out artery blood, and then it has to filter across through these little capillaries to get to the other side to come back up the vein. And they all have the same thing, artery, vein, artery, vein, artery, vein. And this one came through space. All right, and it is identical to this one here. Identical. There's no difference whatsoever. A little bit size difference. But this blood was wet. That blood just didn't erode. It explode. All right, so this is the same thing. It's identical. That's where the vein comes in. That's where the vein comes in, or it comes back, really, actually. You see how squared off they are, and how exactly the same pattern, exactly identical. So, and this is terrestrial. That I know, no question. This did not come through space. This is not terrestrial, and I know that, no question. This did not originate on Earth. This came out of space and burnt up, coming here. You couldn't cook this in this manner. To have it do this, explode the blood only. This was a heated up, and this just got so warm, it blew out the side. And this, my friends, is the same body part as Comet 67P. I think it's a part of a finger. Well, let me put it this way. It's an anchor, just like this ball here with a stalk coming out of it. This one here, might be a little different. Well, actually, the 67P is not a part of a finger. It's got a bone going right down the stalk, so that's different. But all the anchors are the same. There's basically a ball that locks in the meat, and it has all of these little gristly-looking spots that the flesh grabs into. These are these little dishes that run around the edge, and the flesh locks into that, and they can't pull out. I mean, literally, they cannot pull out. They will break, but they don't pull out normally. Very rare. I have a picture of one pulling out, but that's very, very exceptional. Now, so here we go. Fingertip, outer space, terrestrial, fingertip from the same creature as this one. All right, this one didn't erode. And I have a bone ball from a knuckle. One side of it is totally eroded down to the bone. The other side still has a muscle on it. That's how diverse this can be. I'll show you that in a second. It's just incredible. I mean, I have stuff coming out of my ears. Everything I have here is mud fossils. And I understand now that pretty much why my property is saturated with them. I have 10 acres of stone walls and fields and just woods, and it's just, I mean, there's a bazillion rocks here, bazillion. Everything here I just picked up off the ground. This is nothing I went searching for. It's just everywhere, and they're little fingertips too, and that's where the blood ran out the tip. Remember I said you got artery. Well, this one, the artery side didn't. I mean, the artery side is on here. It didn't blow out, but it blew out from the end. And that's actually crystals. I'll show you that in a microscope. But that blood turns into your crystals. It turns into your gemstones. And because blood has that transition metal in it that I talked about. All right? And they all can change into different materials depending upon the conditions that it was in. Now, this was not obviously turned into mud type fossil. This was turned into basalt. This is a goose head, I think. That's what I'm going with. It's my buddy Caesar. See, there's the pattern of the feathers, and there is what you would call basalt. But if you know how to look at anatomical signatures, you can actually see the neck. But it's been transitioned into what they call nucleophilic substitution. And it died laying like this. And all of these pretty much died in a flood, I believe. And I believe it was the Great Flood. Every culture talks about it, so it's nothing I'm making up here. I'm not guessing about, well, maybe there was a great flood. Well, everybody in the world said it. And Velikovsky recorded every one of these statements from around the world. I wrote a book about him because I was so upset at the treatment he received. And he was maligned and demeaned and dismissed and disgraced. And he did not deserve that. And he will be resurrected, I guarantee you. But it's right now, he's virtually a dead person. Nobody has any idea he even existed anymore. Or the ones that do think he was a joke. Well, the ones that were laughing are the jokes. And that's why I get so upset about this, because it's still going on today. I have DNA and CAT scans, specimens. I'm showing you things that destroy everything there is in science. And a lot of work I did, because once I found out there was no taste for truth, I went on a mission of truth. And I'm telling you, we got a lot of things to look at. So let's just go forward with this. And the Kentucky meat shower came out of space. I claim this came out of space. I claim this is a terrestrial identical type fingertip. And the blood supplies, this one just leaked out. This one exploded. This one burnt off all the flesh. This one still has the flesh, but it's converted by nucleophilic substitution. These are the pads of the finger. This is right here is what's called an apical tuft. It's inside, you can't see it, but I have another one here from an eroded one. You see it? It sits right in here, and all these little tendon balls lock into there, and all these fibers come down from this ball. And there's one right there. There's a ball. All of these had balls in them. And the fibers ran down to make your fingers do all these kind of things they do. The tendons are what gives you the ability to pull back and forth, and the muscles are what they call sarcomeres. They pinch in and out. And all of this stuff I got documented. There's no mysteries here anymore. None whatsoever. The mystery is, why will not the people that teach your kids for a lot of money, and if they don't have that piece of paper, they're not going to get a good job. And the piece of paper just means that they can repeat what they were told to say. I don't think it's a good system at the moment. I think we need to reevaluate all the things that we were thinking about. But before that, let me show you that bone ball. This is very cool, because it's on the same hand. I have the full hand, and I have a lot of stuff from this one. And it's on the same hand as this fingertip. And it's a knuckle. It's right there. And there's a tendon runs off it this way. And then the bone ball is here. And you can, well, I'll show it to you. All right, this is the bone I was talking to you about. There's a bone ball under there. The muscle fabric is still on this side. This side is completely eroded to the bone. I'll show you in a moment. This piece right here is tendon. And it's from, I believe, this internal knuckle right here. There's one comes here and one comes here. So this would have been one side, and there was another one on the other side. That's all completely gone, and the muscle with it. Now, then, of course, it runs out flat over the top of your hand up this way. Now, let's look at the muscle side. All right? There's the muscle covering the bone ball. This is the tendon, as I said, that comes down. It comes right down the side of your finger and attaches down and comes to lock your finger in so you can move them around. Now, they break right there. You see that little round spot right there? That's where it transitions into the muscle, because you have tendon always holding an anchor into muscle, and the muscle does this. And that's what this muscle fiber is as well, wrapping around that bone ball. All right, you can see this round spot there, same sort of thing. Everything, you usually have these round anchor balls here and there. Now, this side, you see, it's just a bone. Now, all that other stuff is broken away. You can still see the fleshy red stuff in here. And you can see a little bit of the flesh here, but all of that stuff is ripped away. So, don't forget, this would have been identical to this side here. It would have been identical. The bone, the muscle would be wrapped around here. The tendon would be coming off here. But it's not. Now it's gone. Now, let's see what happened underneath. Here's where you're going to find different types of materials solidify in different ways. You see this? That's the outside, well, it's the capsule of the bone ball. And there's a crust of bone, and inside is basically marrow and other different materials. It's not like this. See, this is the bony part, and that's the bone. This is what they look for now. They find things like this, and then they chisel down until they can find material like this, because then they see, oh, we're at the bone. Well, who cares? I got the whole finger here. I have a CAT scan. The bone is right there. The bone is right there. And this, I think, is a I forget. I think it was a left thumb. I know it's a thumb. I'm almost 100% sure, because it's got an offset bone. All of your fingers have central bones that are right basically in the center. This has an offset bone. And if you take your thumb and feel it, see, feel right there, one side is, that side's flat, this side comes in. So this has an offset bone. So the offset side would be, all right, this is a right hand. The bone is here to the left side. All right, because it's set on this side. That hangs over the edge. One way or the other, who cares? All right, so I got, like I said, I got this stuff coming out of my ears. And this is what happens to bones. They turn black in the center because that's where all the blood is. Blood has all that metals in there. And the astronauts smell steak and metals when they go out on their walks. Now let's see Comet 67P, which I've shown this literally hundreds of times now over the 6, 7, 10 years that I've been, well, it's been about 7 years I've been on the internet trying to make people understand this is our reality. Now, it's up to you to make a decision for what it means to you, but I'm going to tell you right now, whoops, I don't want to do anything with that. If you think the reality you're living in now is reality, well, you got a lot to think about, because it ain't reality. Alright, this is Comet 67P. Apparently there was a bone coming out of here, because this is all tendon and it's snapped off where it would normally attach to muscle. This is the anchor ball. And we're going to look at the anatomical, so don't get worried here. Now let me just show you I was deep into this. I have a lot of information about this, hold on, Comets. Well, that's just one little shot coming out of there. But when they roast, they spit out. Now, here's 67P really up close. This is a bundle of what would have attached to muscle. This is how they break off at the tendon. And there's little straps. These are the straps that are tendons. This was biological. This ball, these little cavities here, are the anchors that hold it into flesh. This was originally in some form of flesh, I don't know what, and it appears to have been going up and attached to a bone. Now this is all like blood cells, really. These are like bloody plasma cells and so forth. And we're going to talk about that later, because I did a blood study. Hold on, let me see. Comets. I had a real good, oh, there it is, Comet jets. Yeah, there we go. That's the one I was looking for. Now, don't forget, these are those little pockets that anchor inside of flesh, and they hold on like you can't pull it out. Now, coming up from the fleshy area down below, there's little tiny blood vessels everywhere, and they run up the stalk, and then they go up to the muscle, which would have been above. And this is the jets running out from individual little blood vessels. And when the sun hits it just the right way, they gas off. Now there's one that has like an unbelievable jet that's coming out one side. I got it here somewhere that shows. There it is. All right, this is a better shot. And see, again, this goes back to 2015. I studied this extremely well. That's a stalk going up to muscle fibers. This is the artery right there. That's an artery. You see that gusher? These are vessels. These are blood vessels. The little vessels that run up to. So this is a huge artery, and it's 120 feet across. And inside of it, it has all these little round balls, which are blood balls, that are boiling off, and they call them dragon balls. Now, let's go to the actual footage when they originally did this research. And I'm going to go through it, and because I haven't gone back again to look it over. Now I realize a lot of things that I didn't realize 100% back then. But I have shown this over and over and over since then. And this was attached to something. These are the anchors, and these are the little holders. Now, they don't gas off. You see these pockets? These are not blood vessels. They're not blood vessels at all. These are part of the tendon ball. That's why they're not gassing off, even though they're getting hit exactly directly with sunlight. All right, this goes back to the same time. They actually took samples of two little particles. They called them Kenneth and Juliet, and it's hydrocarbons, CH, hydrocarbons, ferrous oxides, different states of your blood. Blood is loaded with iron oxides, and what are they? That's the oxygenated and the deoxygenated, and the ones that are in between, they're different states of oxygen, oxygenated iron oxides. Now you got salt, silicon, carbon, hydrogen, hydrocarbons, and they say it's all organic. Well, what is organic? Organic means biological. They never say that, but they say, oh, well, it's organic. I say, well, what does organic mean? Well, it's organic. That's what it is. Well, it means biology. Biology. I'm sorry, it does. See, here's a good shot of the attachments. These are little anchors that run right around this, and it locks it in. So at one time, right up in this area, probably right up to here, was where it really anchored in. I don't know what it anchored into, but I will show you what they look like in the anatomical. All right, the stuff I have on my property is pretty good size, but check this out. This is an artery, and I believe it's an artery. It could be a vein up here, but I'm almost sure that's an artery because they purge out and run their blood out, and blood is running out of there. And that's a pretty good size artery because that is this. These two guys are looking at it saying, wow, look at that. Now, this obviously looks like it was also runoff, but this is muscle tissue. And that was the blood supply that fed it, and it ran out, and they're saying, this is kind of an interesting pattern. Well, this is the vein blood, apparently, and it ran out from this side, or maybe from there, I don't know. But that's artery blood. Now, while we're looking at this, I want to mention something. I would like to see, like, if this blood from something this big is the same size blood as it is from my creatures. Because I bought this real fancy microscope over here. See this thing over here? It's all hooked up and, got real heavy duty megapixels and all this stuff. And I looked at it, and I looked at the blood, and I couldn't find any difference between the stuff I had and, our size blood. So maybe all blood is the same size. I have no idea. But if this is dusty particle blood, I'd like to have somebody test something like that. And I have no idea where that is. But these things are all over the earth. There's just giant creatures everywhere on earth. But I don't see any like saucer size platelets or anything like that. So I'm starting to believe that the blood has to be a certain size only. It can't be gigantic plates. Because then you're not going to get the oxygenation, the transfer of oxygen adequately out of the cell. Because the size of the molecules are tiny. I don't care how big the creature is. The molecules and the metals and everything in there are the same molecules and metals that are you and me. There's no difference. So they have to get them down to that molecular size. And the blood vessels and the blood itself, let's say, has to be into that molecular tiny little range to pass the gases and all of these different transitions of particles back and forth to make you healthy and nutrition and feed the bacteria and do all the things that you need to have done in your body. So I think that all blood sizes are the same, and I'd like to see somebody check this against a regular blood cell. Is this the same? It doesn't make. Are they both an inch across or whatever they are? Well, that's fine. I'd like to see that. But mine aren't big enough to see any difference, or there is no difference in any blood. That's my point. Oh, by the way, well, now that we're seeing what's going on here, I've taken a whole new approach at what is possible in life, and I've gone through all the texts, the ancient texts, including the Bible, including Hesiod, Theogony, Ovid, Herodotus, Plato, right across the board. Now, I find this extremely interesting. This was only discovered right after the the annihilation of the Jews. Basically, they tried to wipe them out, Hitler. And this was just discovered right after that, Nag Hammadi text. Very interesting. And he talks about, these are supposed to be the secret sayings of Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas. And he said, whoever discovers interpretation of these sayings will not taste death. Kind of a good motivator. Jesus said, those who seek should not stop seeking until they find. First of all, you have to seek. And don't stop seeking until you find what truth is. When they find, they will be disturbed. No question whatsoever. When they are disturbed, they will marvel, absolutely, and will reign over all, whatever that means. And after they have reigned, they will rest. Then there's a couple of them, I think 80 and 56, that talk about the earth being being a creature and being a corpse. Those are supposed to be the words of Jesus, and there's 113 sayings, and I got to be honest with you, some of them really, whew. So that's what I'm trying to understand. But when I realized that these giants were in space, and they talked about the battles in space, and they were the Sky Brothers and all this stuff. All the Indians and everybody had the same stories, and they talk about giants being buried under the earth. I'm right down here, I'm in Connecticut, and right down next to Yale, there's Sleeping Giant State Park. And I've looked at that, and that is a giant, and I can find his ribs. I know where his ribs are. I think I'm going to see if I can get somebody with a drone after the leaves come down, and we can actually see his body eroding. And the Indians talk about it. They put him under some special spell, and I don't know, they poisoned him or something. And he's laying down there because his name was Hobamuk, Hobamuk, I think it was. This goes back. This was years and years ago. I did this research, but they're everywhere, and everybody talks about the giants. I mean, this is not like an isolated case. So, whatever the earth is made of, in the Nag Hammadi text, it says it's a corpse and a body. And that's what I'm seeing. Okay, I kept my eye on this from day one, and I have all of the data as much as anybody else has. They were wide open about the mission. There was nothing hidden. And this goes back to 2014. And this is called Exploratorium. And this is the Rosetta mission, and the Philae has landed. Now, originally in here, if you wanted to watch the whole thing, it starts to show how they achieved an orbit by actually using the gravity of this thing. They had to drive it into an orbit, and then finally it took over, and the Rosetta platform was orbiting, and the Philae lander came down and landed. Now, that apparently is where the bone came out. That's that anchor ball, and boy, I don't think I showed you the anatomical. Hold on. All right, you've seen there's giants all over the earth. These tendon balls are all over the earth, and these are the anchors. Now, what we're looking at out there is something like this, but they have these pockets on the outside in addition to having the balls, because the balls attach to the straps. So they're not really showing the pockets here, but they do have them. And these are tendons that go from muscles to bone and to other types of material, like your stomach, mats of tendon. They have a little different anatomy, but basically the same thing. There's an anchor ball, and then there's straps running to them. and that's what pulls to the muscle. And then they have ligaments that run from bone to bone, like this kind of a bone. I got one here somewhere. Like that kind of a bone right there. That's where a ligament would go between another bone. And they wobble against each other, but they don't come apart. All right, now, so let's go back to the Philae. Okay, don't forget, exploratorium, and this is the Philae, and this is that ball, and these are these anchor spots. Now, they don't gas off. The gas comes from around the neck and from the artery, the big artery. Now, listen to what he has to say. I went way out here to about halfway through. Here goes.
All right, so here are some great pictures of this comet taken by the orbiter. Notice on the head of the comet, caught in the shadow right now, there's this crater. And the Philae lander is in that crater, we believe. We're not totally sure yet. We think it's stuck in that crater. And I'll tell you why we think that later. We're aiming to land sort of right around here. And they did land there. Alas, it bounced. Here's another one. This is neat. When they first got the picture, they thought, look, it's two comets joined together. And this happens out in space. You maybe have two comets, they collided together. Or, we don't know this yet, maybe it's one comet that has different materials on it and it's evaporating more around the center. And in fact, if you remember the pictures of the gas jets coming off, they were coming from the neck.
That's because that's where all the blood vessels are. And this, I believe, was another muscle, a tendon bundle, which I showed before, running up to another muscle from that.
So for some reason, that's the place that the ices seem to be evaporating the most, and that's why it's a neck.
It's not ices, and they found out, not ices, the spectral I just showed you, they found later was all organic matter, not ices.
We get a lot to learn. That's why we're there. We don't know all the answers. And here's the flat bottom. They decided not to land on the bottom of the base of the comet. It's got some interesting things. These rocks here are actually 25-story buildings. They're 25 stories high. And there's a kind of a crack, really intriguing crack. I'd really like to know what caused that. And there are some circular features that kind of look like craters, but they're upside down. And there's a crater there and a crater there. So
those are the things that lock into the flesh so that it can't pull out. Those are anchors.
We always expect craters, but which ones are craters and which ones are geysers, we don't know yet. But as it turns on, we'll find out.
Exactly. At this point, they had no clue. The geysers, which they call geysers, are the blood vessels. These little anchor spots, none of them gassed off.
Lots to learn. Another side view of the comet. And then a close-up of the neck. And you can see the boulders in here, realizing that they're multi-story building boulders. And this rock face with striations on it and grooves. What caused that? So the geologists all the planetary physicists were scratching our heads. We've never seen anything like this before.
Right, exactly. And because they can't understand. That is a muscle fiber bundle. And these are where the tendons break off. I believe I've showed some of this, well, I know I've showed it a bazillion times, but today I'm not sure. These are the tendon fibers, and they break off where they attach to the muscle. It's called abrupt transition. This is the anchor, which I'm sure I showed that in the anchor balls.
So we have a lot to figure out, but we have a year or so to take data, so we'll see. And at the American Geophysical Union, which meets in San Francisco every December, the scientists will be pouring forth everything they've discovered this year and next. I'll be there. I'm a science reporter as well as a scientist. I'll be gathering that information and spreading it on to you. So let me go ahead. I have a superpower, and that superpower is the same one as Iron Man. I'm a physicist. And that means I can take the raw data and make it real. So by knowing the volume of the comet and knowing its mass, I know its density. And its density is 1/10 the density of water. This comet is the opposite of an iceberg. An iceberg, 90% is underwater and 10% is on top. You put this comet in water, 90% is on top and 10% is underneath. It's an upside down iceberg.
I find that very hard to believe, but I, I'd like to see how that was calculated and how we could, because I'm telling you, I know what that stuff is, and I don't think that could possibly be accurate. However, we'll have to find out.
So that's a nice model for a comet. Good old Isaac Newton got this equation for the universal gravitational constant. I plugged in the data, and I found out what's the gravity force at the surface of this comet. If you're standing on the comet, how much do you weigh? Well, it turns out gravity there is 100,000th of a g. It's 100,000 times less than you weigh now. If you weigh 100 pounds right now, you would weigh 1,000th of a pound on the comet. That means if you're a Muhammad Ali and you're on the comet, you weigh the same as a butterfly weighs on Earth.
All right, this I fully understand, and that has nothing to do with floating, because it's in space. It's not floating here on water in the gravity of water. I understand all this stuff. I did all of this stuff as he's talking about. And this is how I get to brag about what I did a long time ago. So I came to the conclusion that everything was made of dipoles. There was nothing but polar stuff. And I mean, I did a lot of it. So if anybody wants to talk about this, I can fully hold my own, and I will talk to anybody about quantum. Because I didn't stop back then. This is 50 years ago. This was right after I got out of the Army. I was in Nike Hercules Missiles. And I just keep going with it. So, but I had to get away from academia because there was no future there. All you could do was repeat what they told you to say, or you're done. And nobody would listen to me. Again, I was trying to comment on all of this stuff as this was happening, because I understood from the Mudfossils that I had been working on for years before that. And at this point, I already had I don't know if I had the DNA test done and all that, but I had everything done. And finally, I said, well, this is crazy. I'm going to have to get DNA and CAT scans and all that. And I did, and it didn't change anything. Nobody ever looked. Anyway, Yale won't permit it. Harvard won't permit it. None of them, not a single one. So that's the way it works. Here goes.
Which I thought was quite appropriate for Muhammad Ali, if you remember, right? Float like a butterfly. Just, he happened to float like a butterfly. He has to be on the comet. But, all right. What goes up must come down, except we now know that if you go up at escape velocity, you don't come down. And so I can calculate the escape velocity from this comet. It's 0.5 meters a second or 1 mile an hour. That means if I can leap on the Earth 1 finger width, 1/2 an inch off the ground, with that energy, if I did that on the comet, I would go up into space and never come down again. That's escape velocity. And that's the problem with landing on the comet. Landing on the comet is no problem. Bouncing off, that's a problem. And that's why they had 4, count them, 4 redundant systems to make sure that this spacecraft didn't bounce off the comet. It did, of course, but we'll come back to that. Yeah, well, in fact, it's totally cool. You've got to go to this comet, because on this comet, you're Superman. You can leap into orbit and orbit the entire comet with 1 single bound. Those rocks that are 25-story buildings, you could leap over them. I'm talking Superman here. You just have to make sure you don't jump too hard or you never come back. It'd be good to come back. You might have heard that the comet sings. This is the sounds recorded from the comet. Pretty soon they go to do the flight of the bumblebee. There it is, flight of the bumblebee. Well, it turns out, in space, no one can hear you scream, no one can hear a comet sing. They cheated. That wasn't actually the sound of the comet. That was actually a magnetic field recording. They have devices on the spacecraft that measure the magnetic field. And when the comet blasts gas from inside, it hits the sunlight, and the sunlight ionizes it and turns it into a plasma. And that plasma interacts with the solar magnetic field and causes the solar magnetic field to pulse. And just like a magnetic tape on a magnetic tape drive, remember those? They recorded that pulsing magnetic field and turned it into the sound. Except it was such a low frequency, it was 10,000 times too slow to be heard by the human ear. They speeded it up 10,000 times and to make that music. So, double cheat. But
Oh, okay. That makes sense when you find out that it was just a very, very tiny push to shove, basically. They sped it up, I don't know, thousands and thousands of times. But basically, those were just particles shooting off and being banged back. The pick, 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 but very, very slow, because they're not being real heavy. They're not like high energy particles. So they had to magnify the hell out of it. Let's put it that way. Let's just go back and listen to that one more time, because that was really interesting. I'm not going to listen to the whole thing, but I want to just hear his comments.
And just like a magnetic tape on a magnetic tape drive, remember those? They recorded that pulsing magnetic field and turned it into the sound. Except it was such a low frequency, it was 10,000 times too slow to be heard by the human ear. They speeded it up 10,000 times and to make that music. So, double cheat. But still pretty cool to hear the sound of a comet and have it sing the Flight of the Bumblebee. All right, so we wanted to land on the comet.
Now, why would it change that? Well, I believe it's as it's moving through the sun's different impact zone. If it's hitting it direct, if it's hitting it a little off, whatever it is. That's the only reason I could see for that. And it is gases shooting off. Gases create impact. They're going to shoot out. It's going to be impacted back. That's going to make a click. Even with the light research I did with Rodney, he says he can, when he does this through the Venturi, he can hear the light actually making clicks. He can hear it crackling, he said. It's on occasion, not all the time. He does a lot of experiments, but when he puts it just exactly in a certain way through the Venturi and gets it excited to this certain point, it makes little clicks. So that's what they're hearing, is the sunlight clicking off of the light particle, off of the gas particles that are being emitted from this excited blood, basically.
And here's how you land on a comet. So here they are orbiting, and now it's going to spit the Philae lander at its ass at just the opposite speed that it's traveling, so that it's stationary and it's going to fall under gravity. And it's going to take 7 hours to fall to the comet. Now remember, the comet's rotating once in 12 hours. So
see, remember now, it's rotating once in every 12 hours. That's why it has. It depends on how the sun is hitting.
If you want to land on this part of the comet, you got to drop the spacecraft here, so the comet's rotated halfway around by the time you get there. That's tricky. So here they get. This is what should have happened. They landed. They fired from the middle of the thing. They fired 2 harpoons into the surface to anchor it down. The legs drilled into the surface to anchor it down. They have cameras all over it. These green lines are showing you the field of view of all the cameras they have on this thing. There's cameras on every side to take pictures. They're taking those right now, sending us back the pictures I'll show you in a minute. The thing sticking out the side, they got radio antennas. They're doing a radio. They're actually doing an X-ray of the planet of the comet using radio signals. They're sending radio signals through the comet to the other side where the orbiting spacecraft is. And this lets them look inside the comet. We really want to do this. We want to see what's inside this comet. There's big questions. How much opening is there? How many open spaces? How solid is it? And then this arm comes down, and they drill about 8 inches into the comet, gathering samples which they bring into a laboratory and analyze the samples for amino acids. One of the things we wonder is on the Earth, where did the water on the Earth come from? Where did the amino acids that evolved into you come from? One choice is maybe they came from the comet. Here it is, coming out with the drill. There it goes. Drill in. And maybe they came from comets. So we are going to sample this comet looking for amino acids. We've already collected one amino acid from one comet. We gathered glycine from the comet Wild 2. We flew by Wild 2 with a tennis racket covered in aerogel, and it smashed through the coma and picked up dust particles. We then closed it down and returned it to Earth, where it's been analyzed for the last few years. And we did manage to find some amino acids, but this will be great. We've got a laboratory in that lander, which if we can get that drill into the surface, we'll be able to analyze for amino acids. All right, so here's the landing site. We've got, it's the head of the duck. Here's the big crater at the head of the duck. We went for the landing site here, Gilkia, which is the name of an island in the Nile River. We're going for this spot right there, and they nailed it. They nailed it straight on. It was just the greatest drop ever. I was really impressed that they did that. Alas, before they dropped the Philae lander, they found out that the rocket motor on the top of the Philae lander that was supposed to fire and push it into the surface was dead. So they couldn't use the rocket motor to hold it down. And then they had it programmed that had 3 legs. If 2 of the legs hit the surface at the same time, that fired the harpoons. The harpoons never got fired. Maybe they hit a rock or something that stopped the second leg from hitting at the same time. It hit one and then hit the other. We don't know why it failed, but it failed. And we now know that when it failed, so it crashed down, they landed, they celebrated. Meanwhile, they noticed that the signal from the spacecraft, the radio signal, was pulsing from Philae. And the solar panels on Philae were gathering sun and dark and sun and dark and sun and dark. That's not something that happens to a lander on the surface. That happens to a lander that's up in space, spinning. And so now we think that they actually bounced off, and they bounced a kilometer high. And that took 2 hours. Gravity on this comet is so low that if I drop something from this height, it takes 2 minutes to drop to the comet. And so it hit the legs that are supposed to take up the landing. The shock absorber worked great. The one leg that hit took up the shock. It still bounced, but it didn't bounce enough to take it away from the comet forever. It went up a kilometer and then came down, but instead of coming down here on its landing spot, it came down in this crater. Not a good place to come down. Actually, it then bounced a second time for 7 minutes, and it crash landed against the wall of the crater. So that's the close-up of where they hoped to land. Look at the rocks. I mean, they couldn't find a really smooth spot they wanted to land on. So maybe one of the rocks got them. So they dropped it from 30 kilometers, about 20 miles. They were heading towards the comet. They dropped it. It was supposed to hit at about 1 meter a second. That's 2 miles an hour. It's a 220-pound lander. So it's just like a linebacker walking into you. A good walking speed is 2 miles an hour. And it walked into the comet and then bounced off. So that's what's going on. Here's the path of the spacecraft. So there's the comet. Here's the spacecraft. It was in orbit. They fired the rockets and headed the spacecraft towards the comet, dropped the lander.
All right, I'm going to hold off on this technical stuff for a minute, and maybe we'll pick right back up here, or I will jump ahead to something that's a little more meaningful. Hold on. All right, they really, at this point, they don't even know where the thing landed. Here goes.
So spinning with that wheel inside, it kept upright all the way down until it hit the comet. Okay, so And this is the picture that Philae took on the way down. On the belly of the Philae, they actually had a nice camera. And so this is a close-up it's taking. It's heading here. Look at the cliffs in the shadow. We know it landed in some cliffs in the shadow. We're guessing it hit over here. They don't know for sure yet. They'll be looking down and trying to find where it actually landed. I'm giving you the best guess. As it got 40 meters up, 120 feet up, this is the picture it took of its landing spot. Looks pretty good. But these rocks are all big enough to disrupt the landing. If it hit any one of those rocks. This rock here, I believe, is about 5 meters high. That's about 15 feet high. So that would really hurt, but I don't think they hit that. And then this is the picture they returned this morning. This is the leg of the Philae lander, one of the arms of the Philae lander, and it's up against this vertical wall of rock. And that's what they think is the wall of the crater that they landed in. And it's stuck there, and here's the deal. It's in the shade. In fact, actually, they took this picture, and remember, it has cameras all around it, and this is the best one they've released. They will release higher res versions. So here's the one I just showed you with the wall and the leg, and here's another little antenna sticking out, and it's looking up into space. It's tipped to the side. That's just the blankness of space. And over here, who knows what they're looking at in the dark, and some dirty stuff. They're actually down in the dirt over here. So we're still trying to figure out what we're looking at.
All right, they really don't know at this point, so I'm just going to cut towards the end here and see what they have to say. And I'm going to continue this on because I really followed this. This was before they had any information about it, but I kind of understood at this point what we were looking
So
at.
this is this model here gives you an idea of just how dark it is. And of course, this is rotating much faster than the comet, which rotates at the speed of an hour hand of a clock. But the great things about these three-dimensional browsers, like the one called Second Life, is that you can go in and take the data from ESA and turn it into a shape and explore it, and you can make it big, and it's a nice quick way to do it. And then you can have a three-dimensional printer make the spacecraft, the comet that's coming around. Where's our comet at the moment? Where'd it go? Everybody get a chance to fondle a comet? Oh, I guess I get back up there. Okay, great. So anyway, so this lets you see that shape, that rotating shape, and I actually got the axis right. The axis of rotation goes right through the real axis of rotation. And this was interesting world. Okay, other questions? Last questions on the comet? Yeah.
So will the axis of rotation?
Oh, wait.
Will the axis of rotation change as ejecta are shot out of it?
You betcha. So these ejecta are rocket motors, the equivalent of rocket motors, and the rocket motors can change the rotation rate. It's been known to happen to comets, and it can also change the axis of rotation. It takes a while, but so for right now, it's not ejecting enough to do this. But we'll watch for that actually.
All right, that's the comas where they shoot out the gases, and they will. They're actually cooking the gases, and they will propel out of there, and it should change the rotational orientation of 67P. Anyway, let's probably wrap it up here, or who knows. Okay, it's only a couple of minutes long. I have not seen it yet. It's by Sci News back in a few years ago. And these are the final images of 67P, apparently, as it's final images. That's what they're saying. Now, let's look and see if we can find anything that makes sense to us. All right, I believe these are those cavities that lock in. They might be blood vessels, because that could be blood, but it's hard to see, hard to tell. And I don't know what the size dimensions we're looking at either, but that could be blood. That could be blood right there. So this might just be a blood vessel, and this is the kind of stuff that would cook off in a really strong sunlight. Now, I'd love to see one of those other just cavities. If this is a blood vessel, I don't know. Or is it just one of those cavities that locks the tendon in place? That's hard to say. There's change in the texture. You see this? You're getting a lot more of these little balls. That's looking like tendon or muscle to me. We're starting to see something along that line. Now that could be typically what you're going to come out of blood as it's boiled off. You're going to have minerals and metals inside. Now, the size of the thing, you know, it could be that they would be that big. I don't know. At this point, I don't know. But I'm seeing so many of these little pebbly-looking things. That's exactly what I would expect to see if you took blood and then eroded it and ionized it for literally forever. And okay, credits for the images, European Space Agency. Okay, we had one here, Rosetta mission findings 7 years ago, and then we have one from 2 years ago from Astrum, which I think they're a pretty good source. Well, let's see what they have to say about what did the European Space Agency Rosetta Philae lander discover at Comet 67P. Let's check it out. Now, this is Astrum. Once again, I'm a fair user.
That's why I started Daily Harvest.
I'm not out to steal anything. I'm just out to make comments.
The Rosetta Philae spacecraft that visited 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko was perhaps ESA's most ambitious mission. Launched in 2004 and arriving in 2014, it spent 2 informative years around the very interesting looking comet. Although not everything went to plan, the data that Rosetta and Philae were able to collect about comets has changed our perspective of what we understand about the formation of the solar system, and even about our home planet, Earth. The data will continue to be examined for years to come. But what have we learned so far? I'm Alex McColgan, and you're watching Astrum, and together we will uncover what the Rosetta Philae mission discovered around 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko.
All right, remember, I'm a fair user. I'm going to let this play, and I'm not going to interrupt them because it sounds like they've done some homework here. And I'm just going to let that play out. I've pretty much made my statements about what I think 67P is, and let's see what they have to say.
67P is currently a Jupiter family comet, meaning its orbit doesn't take it much further out than Jupiter anymore. Although it was once a Kuiper belt object, which means it originated beyond the orbit of Neptune. Arriving at this comet was a revelation to mission planners by itself. So far, nothing in the solar system that has been examined closely looks anything like 67P. It's about 5 kilometers across at its longest point, and has 2 lobes, which are joined by a narrow stretch of material in the middle. This by itself was somewhat unusual, but it is also very jagged, unlike a lot of asteroids that we visited. During the course of the mission, it was discovered that the surface of this comet is quite changeable. If we look closely at the neck connecting the 2 lobes, it becomes apparent that this section is under mechanical stress. If we look at these rocks, we can see that there are fracture lines running through them. Fracture lines are also apparent from a different angle. Scientists have used models based on fracture lines found all around the neck region to determine that these fractures permeate deeply inside the comet.
They're tendons. That's why.
Up to 500 meters below the surface. It seems that as the comet rotates about its axis, the two lobes are pulling away from each other, thinning the neck region gradually over time. Huge 10-meter boulders were observed being displaced by this mechanical stress, as well as from the volatility on the surface, sometimes by up to 100 meters due to the comet's weak gravity. This also implies that the comet is really quite...
Whoops. I messed up, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Time and time again, exactly what Rosetta and Philae planned to do, but comets that appeared in the sky.
I'm sorry, I went into another video. I can't even run the TV. Never mind. These are, what I want to do is stop this for 1 second. These are these anchors, and the flesh forms around them, and boy, I'll tell you, you just can't, they don't pull out. And they don't fume. These don't fume. The ones that fume are the
porous,
the arteries.
which is something that wasn't known about comets before this mission. As well as fracture lines, layers can also be seen, implying that during its formation, this comet was built up gradually over time. However, although it is brittle, the surface of the comet is a lot harder than expected. Scientists thought that the initial landing site for Philae would almost be soft and fluffy, kind of like a dirty snow, but this was not the case. As Philae came to land on 67P to directly interact with the comet, it found that its final resting location was solid, thought to be water ice with a thin layer of dust. Mission controllers for Philae tried to get a sample of the soil, but as you can see, Philae ended up at an awkward angle and wasn't able to get its drill into the surface. However, readings were still able to be obtained by examining the material on the craft itself, which had ended up on Philae after the bounces. Of the surface material examined, it was determined that there were 16 different organic compounds, 4 of which had never been detected on a comet before.
These are all organic. Organic means biological.
While organic compounds do not mean life, life is based on organic compounds. While Philae wasn't able to get too many readings from the surface, Rosetta was able to get some samples of the comet by collecting some of the dust snow that was ejected away from the comet into space. One of the most impressive shots Rosetta was able to take is this video of dust particles and cosmic rays shooting off in all directions, with background stars moving in the background. All the particles are visible here because Rosetta is looking at the night side of the comet.
Exactly. John Glenn did the exact same thing. He called them fireflies. And you have to be in a certain orientation coming into the darkness or going away from the darkness. I'm not sure which one it is, but I guess it's coming. It was real bright. They're coming into the brightness. Now they're going to lose them in a second. But before...
Meaning increased exposure can pick up these interesting visual elements. Throughout the mission, Rosetta collected roughly 31,000 dust particles, and interestingly, their composition didn't change much throughout the course of the mission, even as the comet became more active, meaning that the whole nucleus of the comet is likely to be consistent throughout.
No, it means that that's all blood boiling off of there. That's not just dust particles. That is blood boiling off. So the consistency is the consistency of blood, and it was.
The dust particles consisted of complex, organic, carbonaceous material, mixed in with sodium, magnesium, aluminium, silicon, calcium, and iron.
It's 100% organic. That's exactly what's in you.
What separates this material from an asteroid's, however, is the presence of an abundance of hydrogen and oxygen. It is theorized that asteroids have been heated a lot longer than comets have due to their closer proximity to the Sun, which has stripped the hydrogen from their compositions. Comets, however, have been kept away from the inner solar system for much of their lives, meaning these dust samples are pristine relics from the formation of the solar system. and potentially even the molecular cloud the Sun would have originated from. Oxygen was an unexpected find, as it's highly reactive, and if there is hydrogen around, it will usually bind together to form H2O. Carbon and hydrogen were also detected in the comet's tenuous atmosphere by Philae. The dust particles you see here are tiny. The biggest that was collected was only 2 millimeters across. But, interestingly, it is particles just like these ones that light up the sky during a meteor shower. What these views do give us, though, are an insight to the material that formed the solar system, so that we can see where the solar system evolved from. Comets tend to be very dark, only reflecting 3 to 4% of the sunlight that falls on them, which you wouldn't expect from something considered to be icy. But actually, not a lot of the ice in a comet is exposed to the surface directly. Most of the comet is coated in this layer of complex carbonaceous dust, which is darker than asphalt.
It's it's eroded, deoxygenated vein blood, basically. It's plasma that is turned dark from oxidation.
Light that isn't reflected is instead absorbed, heating the volatile material beneath the dust layer, causing outgassing of water and carbon dioxide, which also blasts the tiny dust particles Rosetta picked up into space.
That's a blood vessel, and that is, I know what it is. I have them here, and I can show you. They have a vein, little portal, and they have an artery, and that's the artery, and they're in these what they call bone foramen.
These colored sections in the time-lapse show exposed water ice, and as you can see, it's not a very big percentage of the comet itself. Zooming out a little bit and looking at comets generally, this is why comets have 2 tails. One tail follows the orbit of the comet. This tail is the dust tail. The dust tail is illuminated as it reflects sunlight. The other tail consists of the volatile material, the water and carbon dioxide that outgassed from the comet. This tail follows the direction of the solar wind, and these particles are illuminated through ionization and interactions with the charged particles from the sun. It is often hard to see comets with your naked eye on Earth, but every so often a comet will outgas enough material that it is visible. In the northern hemisphere, the last one I saw was Hale-Bopp in 1997 when I was just a kid. What an amazing sight it was. You guys in the southern hemisphere have been a bit luckier with comets. You've had Comet McNaught in 2007 and Comet Lovejoy in 2011. Going back to 67P, there was one other very big reason why the Rosetta Philae mission happened in the first place, and that was to see if water on comets is the source of water on Earth. Before this mission, the theory was that Earth was bombarded by comets early in its development, back when the solar system was a lot more chaotic. Considering a large portion of comets are water ice, these could have given the surface of Earth the water we enjoy today. But, as it turns out from Philae's findings, this was not the case. Scientists were able to determine this from the water vapor's deuterium ratio to hydrogen, which is significantly different from Earth's. Deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen with an added neutron. The ratio of deuterium to hydrogen in water is key to determining where in the solar system an object originated. Here's Earth's ratio, and here is 67P's. As you can see, they are very different. Only 2 comets have had their water vapor measured for deuterium directly, 67P and Halley's Comet, and neither suggests that comets were the source of water on Earth. Instead, this data gives more weight to models that suggest asteroids are the source of water on Earth.
All right, let me just explain to you something. Your body is loaded with water. If Earth is literally an organic body, and I believe that is the case now, Earth is a corpse and a body, and therefore it is saturated with water. That's just the nature of biology. Now, in outer space, when it's broken up and it starts to evaporate off and it's hit by sunlight all day long, yes, you're going to have an absolute totally different isotopic hydrogen and oxygen. Everything is going to be different because it's being bombarded. And that's what they don't understand, because they don't understand electron flood theory. Everything's based on a Bohr model, which doesn't work either. So let's see, maybe I'm just going to hold it off for here today. We need to do a lot of investigating on this, but I can see they're not going to do any more that we're going to be that much interested in. All right, so that's going to be it for today, my friends. They need to re-examine everything under the new Mudfossil regime. It's a new regime of science. It is. And it changes a heck of a lot. I mean, literally just about everything. So until they stand up and confront what is being presented here, then it's really not right to be teaching people things that you can't support. And at this point, the things that are being taught about our past and about virtually most of everything that I could find is just not true. So if you want to continue on paying to be told what you have to say to be considered educated, then that's up to you. But I stayed away from that. And I don't have any pieces of paper that say I'm educated, so I'm just an idiot to everybody. But I'm going to tell you what, I have more education than any of these people. And I have it in every single field. And I have it confrontationally. I don't have it just like a little puppy saying, oh, yes, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. I remember, I remember, I remember. And that's all they can do. I remember what you told me. I'll make sure I keep them under my thumb. Well, I don't like thumbs. I got all the thumbs I need. I showed you my thumbs.